Hi everyone, I'm your host Matt Salem, and you've tuned in to another episode of Our Best Behavior, brought to you by Behaviorally. We are the global digital-first leader in defining and diagnosing human behavior to help you achieve the most valuable moment in marketing, when a purchase transaction occurs. We are Behaviorally, the transaction experts. Each episode, we share insights on trending topics within our industry and of interest to our customers. Today, I'm very happy to be joined by Ken Hauser, Senior Manager, Market Research at Church & Dwight. Ken, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Matt. Great to be here.
So we're here to talk a bit about a specific chapter from our Power of Packaging to Drive Shopper Growth ebook. And this ebook is a compilation of 50 years worth of best practice learnings to help inspire and serve as a practical guide when it comes to creating effective pack design. And the chapter that we're going to dive into a bit is called Seeing is Believing. And this ties to something that really is what Behaviorally has at its core, which is an expertise in understanding and interpreting visibility within a shopping environment, the importance of visibility and how to think about impacting visibility, because that's one of the core foundations, I would say, to effective pack. So I wanted to start, Ken, by talking to you a bit about kind of two areas, if you will, for visibility, because when you think about it, there's the shelf, right, and the importance of being seen at shelf. And then there's the individual packs themselves. And when you think about the different design elements that make up a pack and the visibility of those elements. So, starting with the shelf and thinking about visibility from your perspective as a researcher, where does that fall within kind of the KPIs that you want to assess? And how do you think about visibility with your team?
Yeah, visibility is very important. I mean, it's the consumer, comes up to the shelf and they need to, find a product for them. It's the first thing that stands out is usually the first thing, that they start to look at and, gravitate from there within the category. So visibility is, very important, especially, when it comes to, brands and new products. Visibility is important to get consumers to view on something they haven't seen before, or maybe something that's new that we want them to pay attention to. So,
yeah,
very important.
For sure. And, it's important because entering that consideration set, right? Like if you're not seen, you're not even being thought of. So when we think about the shelf set, are there specific approaches from a research perspective that you like to use to measure visibility? I mean, obviously, I know that we've partnered together. We've used eye tracking. I think that is kind of the key metric that everybody kind of homes in on. But are there any other ancillary metrics that you've used, perhaps, maybe as a proxy for visibility, or things that you ask consumers to ensure that they understand what they've seen?
Yeah, I think like you're mentioning, eye tracking is the most common. That's what we've used to make sure consumers are seeing it. Sometimes we'll do work digitally too, where we have to use the camera on the computer to kind of see what consumers are looking at and make sure it's visible as well within, a certain time frame. We also want to make sure that they're kind of picking up on it. It's not the last thing they see. So like you're mentioning, I think, eye tracking is very important to understand, how quickly they're getting to the product. And also we do ask them qualitatively what they're taking away from that as well.
Yeah. When you're working on a research initiative and working hand in hand with designers, what are those discussions like around the visibility aspect? I mean, does it start with, color? Is there a certain kind of checklist that you have when you think about driving visibility in a category and you're talking with your design team? Is it like, okay, first let's make sure what the color is. Let's make sure what the size of the brand is. Is it that direct, or is it, in other words, I guess, are there 3, 4, 5 specific areas that tie into visibility that you always talk about with your design team, or does it really change based on initiative and strategy?
I think it does change a little bit based on initiative and strategy, but I think when you have a pack, it's helpful to have a navigation system on there that helps consumers, easily flow throughout the pack. So something that draws them in, whether it be color or whether it be style of design, something that can help draw their eye in. And then from there, it's communication and the flow of communication to tell a story, to make it simple for the consumer to kind of navigate through the pack, get the information they need, and then hopefully ultimately buy your package from there, your product.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So as you talk about that storytelling, I would assume you go in with a list of, here's the story we're trying to tell. How do we translate that, so to speak, to viewing the packaging? And when it comes down to measuring that, clearly it might be eye tracking, it might be some qualitative, but is that something that there's flexibility in terms of measuring what really is success? In other words, if a pack is winning on multiple dimensions in research, but when it comes to viewing elements within a pack, that order wasn't quite right. You know, how much can a team get hung up on that as compared to the bigger picture because of the importance of visibility, right? Like we all know you need to have messages seen for them to resonate. So does that ever become a tension point or a sticking point?
Yeah, I think visibility is important, you know, sometimes to a detriment where things are, you know, you'll use a color that draws things in, but then the navigation on the pack is really difficult and they walk away from it and go to another product. Mm-hmm. So I think they're equally as important to get consumers to kind of come into the pack, whether that be color or some kind of device or, you know, something that, you know, is important to the consumer within the category, perhaps an icon or something that helps them kind of navigate what they're looking for. And then the story is really important because when they come to the pack, you know, they want to kind of understand, you know, what is this for? What's the difference between other products? You know, what is this giving me? And, you know, other aspects of it, like how much am I getting for the count and size and things like that. But yeah, ultimately they need to be able to get that information, process it quickly because in, you know, quite a few categories, the consumer is not at shelf for a long period of time. They want to be there, you know, as quickly as they can to make the right choice for them. So in and out, I think, you know, the quicker we can get them to navigate and find the things they want, the quicker we can get them to purchase and on their way to, you know, moving on with the rest of their journey in the store.
Sure. Thinking about your experience and working a lot in the OTC realm and the prioritization of communication on pack, you know, sometimes there's what I would say are cost of entry benefits that we want to confirm with the shopper, right?
Right.
Other times there's the point of difference or the new kind of innovations that are part of a pack introduction or, you know, maybe it's a restage and we want to reprioritize how we're communicating. What's your view on what we want to communicate first? Is it more important to get that cost of entry across and confirm it? Or is that going to take a back seat in some cases, and more so what's that difference needs to come across first? Because it's really kind of 6 in one hand and a dozen in the other in some ways, and you really want both, right? I mean, you want to be different, but you also want to reassure. So I don't know if you have any thoughts there on one being more important than the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think there needs to be some standardization in architecture because, you know, every time, like, you go to launch a new product, you want to focus on the feature that's different, right? So you don't want to have, you know, a ton of new products with different ways of addressing the feature out there, and it makes it complicated for the consumer ultimately, right? But you do want to be able to call attention to it through some mechanism, whether it, you know, it be making it bold or bigger or kind of focusing on it in a little bit different way on the pack. I think you stick to a similar level of architecture, which is what the consumer is looking for when they're purchasing a product in the category. And then somehow you find a way to highlight the different benefit, whether it be flavor or shape or size or something that's unique or even different ingredient, whatever it is. I think there's always a way to kind of, you know, make that attractive without detracting from the main communication that the consumer's really there first to kind of understand.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I think that's kind of the holy grail in a way, is communicating the new addition, so to speak, without, as you put it, detracting from what the consumer also needs to have to reassure them that it's right for them. In thinking about examples of packs that you've worked on in your career, you know, if not currently, in the past, are there any that you would point to where visibility, whether it's at the pack level, you know, individual pack, or maybe the broader category level, created some challenges for you? Maybe because, you know, you were working with a fresh kind of palette or canvas, I should say, and you had to kind of make sure that you get all of the information on there in a way that there's competing elements and competing priorities even within your team, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked on, several packaging initiatives. I think, Preparation H was an interesting one. I think where, there's quite a draw there from the colors. Consumers know the colors of Prep H, and, there's not a ton of products in the category, so it's easy for them to find the product. But I think once they get to the product, there were various different types. So then it comes down to navigating what do the different types offer, how do we differentiate them from each other to get the consumer to the right product for them. So that was really the challenge. Is visibility was kind of easier to get, to draw them into the broader brand, but to get them to the right product for them was more of a little bit of a challenge because of making sure we told the story the right way to get them to what they needed to solve their issue.
Yeah, no, that's a great example, and I remember, partnering with you long ago on that stuff, and I love that example because you bring up this great dynamic of it's a brand that has a lot of stopping power at the shelf set, right? It's that bold yellow with that blue brand mark that really breaks through and contrasts on top of it. Yet once you're in the portfolio, there's a different use of color to help identify variant, but then there was this extra layer of like, well, which one is really the right one for me? And I think that's where the third piece comes in of the remaining communication points and that difference that we were just talking about, right? Like, how do you shout out that difference?
Exactly, making it clear what the overall intent of it is first, like what's the benefit for it, and then kind of like, some other information that can help them process kind of what it includes or, that sort of thing. So, yeah, making it easy for the consumer to navigate is definitely very important, especially whether it be icons that help them too. You can use that as well, like if it's an ingredient where the icon makes sense to add, or an icon for some, whether it's referred or, physician recommended, whatever it is. Something like that might help them as well. It doesn't always have to be more words on the pack, which I think, a lot of folks think it's always, the more language, the better. It might be less language, some icons, something, just make it easy. What would you want to see when you go and try and pick something up?
Yeah, you stole my thunder a little bit there because I was going to revert back to the icons because you had brought it up. And then sure enough, that's where you went. So great minds think alike in that regard.
Right.
But just to go a bit further on the icon piece, I find icon utilization on pack interesting because sometimes it's very intuitive, right? Like you see a shield, so it protects, for example, right?
Right.
But other times it feels like icons are being used more so, whether this is with intent or not, as something that grabs attention, but doesn't necessarily convey its meaning without the words that accompany it. And I'm wondering if over your career, you've seen any challenges in using icons to communicate with shoppers. In other words, did you hear feedback from shoppers ever like, hey, yeah, that icon's there, but why is this picture of a tree supposed to mean that it helps my allergies? Like, I really would have never thought that right away. I don't know if you've had any experiences like that or if you have any advice on the best way to think about understanding with shoppers what the most effective utilization of icons can be.
Yeah, I think it is something where it has to make sense to the consumer. They shouldn't have to think too hard about it. That's really, going to be an issue if that happens. I mean, I've seen it used effectively, icons used effectively for things like, even flavors. They might show a fruit or something like that, or an ingredient where you might know what things look like to a degree, like aloe or something like that, or, a drop of water as moisturization, something where consumers can kind of take that away rapidly without having to think too much. When it gets really difficult, like you're describing, you're showing something where you have to take 2 steps down the road, that's not going to work. But I've seen it effectively in like, some ingredients, some, flavors, things like when it's doctor recommended, either a number 1 or something with a physician symbol on it, something like that, where consumers know that right off the bat. So,
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess one last piece I wanted to hit on when it comes to seeing is believing is still tied to color. When you think about color, category context is very important, right? So, red might mean hot in some categories for flavor. In other categories, which are still food, it might mean cherry, right? Or even in OTC, it could mean cherry flavored, right? If it's, say, like a cough syrup or something like that. So the context has an impact on the interpretation of color. Then there's always this idea of, well, if I want to be revolutionary, a good way to break through is by using a unique color. Because we know shoppers see color first overwhelmingly, right? So again, just hearkening back through your experience, do you have any success stories or watch outs when it comes to trying to break through with color in a way that's unconventional for a category?
Yeah, I mean, I think color is great when it kind of fits in with either your kind of style, like, how you have colors laid out within the franchise to differentiate different items. And it's just an extension of that. Or, it also kind of fits in, like you're saying, when it means something to the consumer, whether they can pull away, oh, this is green, it has aloe in it, or this is, cherry flavored, it's red. But, a lot of people might use different colors just to kind of get the consumer to focus on the product, like an orange or something that's very, it pulls them in quickly at shelf, but it doesn't really have any meaning to them. I think that's where it really, creates more of a distraction because, if you keep adding items and trying to find different colors that are going to pull them in, eventually you're just making it more difficult on the shelf.
Yeah.
Have a couple of those out there. So I think it has to, like you're saying, be tied to something, either kind of the navigation of the franchise overall, where I can understand kind of this color is this in the franchise, this is this, or something specific about the product that fits, consumer interpretation need.
Yeah, and I think breaking through with a color that's revolutionary in a category is always difficult. That's not to say it can't be done, but I think, and also in speaking to context, in certain categories, it's going to be harder than others to have that unique color break through in a way, because if there are associations that are consistently made, whether it's cost of entry based or, flavor based or whatever it may be, you take a real risk, and sometimes it could be a calculated risk that leads to success, but you do take a real risk if you kind of deviate from what consumer associations are and expectations are within a category.
Right. I've seen it work well on like new brand entries to a category where, you're really trying to set yourself apart from some of the category norms, right? If, somebody is purple or somebody is blue or whatever, you want to be different from that just to kind of stand out. But to keep doing it within your current portfolio gets really difficult.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm going to take color to a different and personal touch here because, Ken, not only have we worked together, but, I like to consider you a friend, and I've known you for a long time. Same. You and me both share cigar smoking as a hobby. Mm-hmm. What's your favorite color cigar? What leaf do you prefer? Are you a natural? Are you a Maduro? Are you an Oscuro? Where do you sit when it's like you're reaching for your favorites?
More along the medium lines. I don't like it too light, but too dark is too strong sometimes. Okay. So I am a little, I guess I'm more of a medium guy when it comes to cigars.
All right.
Although I'm different when it comes to coffee. I mean, coffee, I go for the dark roast. So interestingly enough, I guess cigar smoke can be, strong and powerful. So medium's good for me.
Okay. What about on your scotch that goes with your cigar?
Oh, well, that's I'm open to that. That could we can go various types there.
Okay. Definitely. Well, maybe we'll try some combos later on if we have a chance.
That sounds good.
Okay, cool. Well, hey, Ken, thanks a lot. Really appreciate you coming on with us today. Once again, for our audience, you've been tuned in to Our Best Behavior, brought to you by Behaviorally. Ken, thanks again, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you, Matt. Great time. Thanks.